Energy and Environment Commission. Just for people to know that we are recording this session and we will be posting the recording on our website. And first kind of welcome Rob, and I guess Doug isn't here yet, or not. So welcome to Rob as a new member, formally. So we'll maybe go around and everybody introduce themselves. We'll start at the table here. Carrie.
Carrie Thompson, C2E2 Commission member for 3 years or so, Vice Chair.
Sandy Lewin, I've been on the commission for about 6 months.
Eric Gibbs, I've been on the commission, I think less time than that, and I thought I was the shortest termer, but now Rob gets the baton. So.
Hi, I'm Kevin Vincent. I've been on C2E2 for more than a couple of years, I guess now.
Mr. Shamali, commission member for 2+ years now.
Rob Sandola taking over as newest member, 1 or 2 newest members.
I'm Mark Greenwood. I guess I joined the commission in September.
Rebecca, hi, I'm the staff liaison.
So who is online? Any commissioners?
Not that I see. We can go over guests.
Yes, so we can just have the guests and introduce themselves.
Judy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Judy Collins. I'm with the League of Women Voters, Arlington and Alexandria City. I'm observer.
Okay, and Ruth?
Hi, I'm Ruth Woolard. I'm with the Sierra Club, the local Sierra Club. I'm an observer.
Hey Doug, we're just introducing everybody. If you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Doug Snowenboss. I'm a new member of the commission and looking forward to being a part of it all.
He's also taken over as chair of the EC. Mitra?
Demetri McBride, Bureau Chief for Arlington County's Office of Sustainability and Environmental Management.
Demetri, it's pretty hard to hear you. Can you speak up? I'll turn the volume up too.
Is this better?
Yeah, much better. Thank you.
Okay, Demetri McBride, Arlington County, Bureau Chief for Arlington County's Office of Sustainability and Environmental Management.
Thank you. And Kristen Patterson?
Hi, Kristen Patterson, just listening in on the meeting tonight. Thank you.
Everybody? Okay. Any public comment? All right. So first is to approve the minutes for February. Anybody?
I'll move. I second.
Anybody have any comments or changes? I think I made just a few tweaks, but
Yeah, I saw your tweet. Thank you for the review. Always good to have a second set of eyes.
always nice to know somebody actually read them.
Yeah.
By the time you see them, forgotten what anybody said anyway. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so quickly to our first agenda item, and we'll turn it over to Demetra so we can have a discussion about the Green Building Incentive Program, which is being updated this year.
Okay, I just want to preface this by saying this is kind of a 75,000 foot view. We're doing something, or we're not doing, we're going to propose something very bold and very different in this update. And as you can imagine, that takes an enormous amount of socialization internally. It's probably going to be deeper than what we've ever had, but without teasing that out too much, if we can go to the next slide. A number of you are new, so very quickly, this is a program that has been around for just over 20 years. It was the first of its kind in the Commonwealth of Virginia. a lot of the green building programs that you see, particularly in the Nova region, are modeled after Arlington's early program. It started out as a way to incentivize high-performing buildings and get beyond state code, which, as you know, is very constraining, along with a very strict application of Dillon Rule in the Commonwealth. As a volunteer program, what the green building, we call it GBI program, offers developers are these varying bonus density incentives. So there's additional density given to them in return for high energy efficiency and sustainability components in the design and construction of the project. In 2000, it was launched in 2000 in 2000, created in 1999. In 2003, the eligibility was extended to all site plan projects. Between 2009 and 2012, there were again several updates to the program and to the ordinance. It adjusted the levels of bonus density, and it started to align, of course, the objectives and the incentives and the eligible criteria more closely with the county's community energy plan. There is a major update in 2014 that jumped to requiring LEED Silver certification, ongoing energy use reporting for a decade, Energy Star post occupancy certification for offices. And then the most recent update in 2020 upped that to LEED Gold certification and added on a number of additional, not substitute, but additional criteria that fall under biophilia, EV charging, diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, and more. At that time, in the 2020 update, the board asked staff to come back to them with an update proposal in 3 years. Can you go to the next slide, please, Rebecca?
Just for context, is that there were a number of groups, including our commission, that actually pushed to make it mandatory that buildings be all electric starting in 2023, along with they were going to propose increase in energy efficiency requirements. That did not make it through the process, but the compromise was they would update in 3 years as opposed to 5 years.
And that's where we are?
That's where we are.
And that's where we are. So we started probably, I would say, around 7 months ago, looking at the program's performance to date, the latest iteration. And really for the first time, up until this point, the program was just simply recorded and tracked on the number of square feet that it applied to. But we really started breaking that down and saying, because in the last iteration, there were 4 different tiers of bonus density, with, of course, increasing criteria and application of energy efficiency and other measures in order to get the higher density. Out of this review came an interesting pattern, and at the time, to put it into context as well, the board allowed for developers to grandfather in current plans under the old, pre-2020 version of the program. So what we found is that in 2022 alone, there were 5 million square feet. This is extraordinary, quite honestly, in the performance and the history of the program. However, when you break down that 5 million square feet and as to what category they fell into, over 50%, roughly 54% of the buildings and projects were grandfathered in under the prior pre-2020 iteration. Of the roughly 46% that remained, there were only Tier 1 and Tier 2, the lowest tiers. There were absolutely no applications whatsoever under Tier 3 and Tier 4. And in addition, we had interviews with developers and asked them about their, experience with the program, what worked for them, what didn't work for them. As you can imagine, we hear a lot of developers that come back and say it's very frustrating to have, for example, the EV charging and then go and submit load letters to Dominion, and Dominion rejects it because they say they don't have the capacity for that in the grid. So then the developers say what we're being forced to do is to pay for electric utility infrastructure in order just to qualify for the bonus density. And it's very important, particularly for people who are not familiar with the program, to understand that this is not the only option in the county for developers to earn bonus density. They can write out a check to affordable housing and get the same density bonus. So we were looking at a program that if we just simply started upping the bar, upping the bar, upping the bar, as we have been, without really thinking about evolving the program, then what we were probably setting up was self-obsolescence of the program, less uptake, and a default to other opportunities for bonus density outside GBI. So we sat down and basically said, what can we do and what's missing? And let's take this opportunity. If we're going to make a definite change, then let's make it a bold change. Let's make it an innovative change. Let's make it a change that actually puts us in a direction where maybe you won't even have to have the update every 5 years. But what you're going to have is a kind of elastic and more future-facing program that isn't really focused on just simple criteria or single criteria. So this is the analysis that we've done. We're certainly happy to share the specific numbers with both the Energy Committee and C2E2. The other thing to keep in mind is that for developers as well as for us, it's been a little bit of a disappointment because LEED does not exactly perform, particularly in the energy sector, as anticipated or projected. So all of these very high measures where there was an expectation of exceptional efficiency, et cetera, it's not actually in the application and operation of the building acting in that manner. So again, all of this together really stimulated this, really dramatic reinvention of the program. Next slide, please.
Is it possible to pose a question?
I'm sorry, yes.
Yeah.
Hi, Demetria, it's Eric. If you could just, Rebecca.
Hey, Eric.
Yeah. Just a quick question. If the
Sure.
Incentive GBIP bonus density is not a draw, they don't need it for profitability, what is the draw?
Tax benefits?
I think there was, certainly there were bragging rights. I mean, it was good to be under the green building bonus up until some point where they feel as though it might be getting too expensive, or again, it's not performing as imagined. There was also a draw because there was an anticipation that all of these measures would perform exactly as advertised.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And just quick follow on, is there, do you have any anecdotal evidence or any data about resale? So if, developers selling off a project with this designation, is there any value in that in the market?
I gotta be, you touch on a really, really, really good point, Eric, and it's why we're also just subliminally, this underlying ambition for the program to be more elastic and more evolved is because, as you know, I think if I recall it correctly, the average building turnover between being built and then being flipped, put on the sales block to a new owner is around 7 years in Arlington County for commercial and multifamily. And there have been so many changes to the program, updates, that it's hard to really track and find kind of hard data that you can really track with consistency because it's moved around quite a bit.
Okay, thank you so much.
And we've also adopted measures or offered measures and said these are eligible to get you more bonus density that, again, developers have not elected to do. And those were measures, biophilic measures, for example, that we really, really, really would like to see because, again, without getting too wonky, flooding and extreme heat are the region's 2 main climate vulnerabilities. So another focus of our thinking was, okay, we really have to start thinking about urban heat island effects and extreme heat.
Can I just jump in? This is Carrie. Hi, Demetria.
Hi, Carrie.
Just following along his line of thinking, if we were like many European cities where they have to advertise the energy efficiency of the buildings, there would be a market value to buildings that, have reduced energy costs and are closer to net zero energy levels. But there's a number of complicating factors, like the people who end up paying the utility bills aren't always the owners of the building, right? So we have that issue. But I think Eric has touched on an important point for us to think about in the future about, you know, what the market will do with buildings that are more energy efficient, and, you know, they must be more attractive at some point.
You know, Carrie, you know, again, you guys are bringing up all the right questions, and just for the benefit of those in the room who may not be familiar, this kind of what we call benchmarking. In Europe, they do it. They have two scores, an energy score and an environmental score. They are mandatory for buildings. They are published. And what happened in the very beginning is what we found in California when we tried to get statewide automatic benchmarking, is that everybody was pushing back because it is a cost. It requires that you know, have staff and an apparatus that's capable of doing that and then reporting it. But what happened in Europe is that there was this pushback and resistance, and then people decided to use it. And right now, what you've got are the banking industry has incorporated it into their business model. The real estate industry has incorporated it into their business model. Definitely energy efficient buildings are proven to be high scoring ones, are proven to be desirable both for renters, commercial and residential, as well as purchasers of buildings. The banks evaluate them at a higher level. Real estate market evaluates them at a higher level. Insurance really gives them a kind of discount because they operate more efficiently and more effectively. So that took around, it started oddly enough, if I remember correctly, in Scotland. And in 10 years, it has become embedded in the business models of major industries associated with buildings. So every single year, some brave soul in Richmond brings up a benchmarking law that quickly gets killed in committee. But I think we should probably still strive for that.
Okay, thanks. Please continue.
So, and again, this is super, super high level because we haven't bounced this off leadership, and, you know, I'm anticipating that I'll probably be called out to the woodshed at some point on this. But we wanted to really just open our minds and say, okay, what is the best way? Number one, I think giving developers more choice. So we were talking about, you know, keeping a lead-based pathway, but also adding on a climate adaptation pathway, or FEOS. FEOS is actually not exactly even universally well known among architects and designers of buildings, but for those who use it, and Victoria is familiar with it, obviously, and Paul Roman, who came to us from Gensler, is familiar with it. But it's not a kind of universally recognized and deployed design standard for buildings, but it is an exceptionally effective one. And this is the one that if you go to really, oh, bless you, whoever that was. If you go to architects and designers and building owners around the country that are really doing exceptional buildings, and there was one, I believe, that was just completed or is about to be completed in New York City. This is really the performance-based. It's future-facing, climate-facing, and performance-based. As you can imagine, it requires more, it's more expensive. So we also wanted to add an existing buildings pathway because, as you know, in the 20 years of the existence of the program, it has only been for new buildings, not attached at all to existing buildings. And as a result, inadvertently, certainly, we were kind of creating winners and losers in our own building stock. So I have to tell you, we're looking at, and I can only go this far, we're going to suggest limited term certain financial incentives in order to bring developers. But there was something else that came up in our analysis of the program and our deep dive with the whole team that was really telling, is that we do not even get the site plans at inception or close to inception. It's not that they're a done deal and there's no latitude by the time we get them. But if you're talking about these performance-based buildings, the earlier you can at least float those design options, the better, because as you know, developers, and it makes sense, they don't want to spend the time and the money to go back and start all over and design. So we thought, you know what we should do is we should propose that prior to the launch of the new update of the program, whether it be for 4 months or 6 months or whatever, we were going to offer a compelling, robust, attractive, determined outreach, education, and just workshop program for developers, building owner and operators, designers, architects, and contractors. Because that way we can at least try to help do what Carrie was just talking about and not just share the design options, not just show how they operate, not just give them the benchmarks and the case studies, but also to show them that these buildings may operate more efficiently. So perhaps they're going to operate at a cheaper, level of operation, even though the design may be more expensive. And then if we can actually make a compelling case to, leadership within the county for these limited financial, I'm not saying it's going to be a slam dunk. It's a really big experiment. I have to be honest with you. But the staff is very excited about it, and we think that it is a way to start pivoting this program towards something that really meets not just immediate goals, not just targeted goals, but really long-term goals under the CEP and under the roadmap.
Demetra, would this perhaps possibly include kind of offering developers a kind of a very limited consultation with, somebody that's really experienced in the kind of, especially zero energy, the types of development that we're looking for as their process, so that they can, kind of help urge them in the same direction. Obviously, it's got to be pretty limited because it gets pretty expensive if they're engaged, but having, at least somebody to say, you might want to think about this and that. And so that, again, early on, so that they can start.
The 6-month training, kind of program that we're thinking of. When I say that, we're really just kind of putting on our creativity caps, staff has come up with, hey, this design firm that designed the, and built the New York building, why don't we have a workshop, a remote workshop with them? And have them demonstrate the design of the building, why, what the outcomes are going to be, really start bringing in those types of things. And then it's an interesting thought of what you might be able to offer as a service, a kind of limited service, but a service. I'm going to be curious to see what the reaction, if it goes forward as we're planning, it would be interesting to see what the reaction would be to that kind of training program, where you give them exposure to a kind of, this isn't an outrageous, it's being used in Europe, it's being used in other places in the United States. And in fact, for the existing buildings program, I'm happy to say that Montgomery County, what we were thinking of, we discovered Montgomery County kind of did a soft launch of around 9 months ago. They haven't fully gone through, they're kind of working on their first project under that model. But all that to say that, yeah, I think that we can be creative. It all costs money, obviously, but I think it might be an investment just to socialize and educate and persuade, local builders and designers.
Yeah, and that's
to
kind
maybe
of
think in that,
general message we've done before is that, having this kind of little bit of hand-holding, whether it's homeowners or developers or owners of these big multifamily units, is and can be very effective.
Yeah, and I know there aren't going to be a lot of case studies, but we'd like to have as many case studies as we can, because I'm just waiting for the developer that comes up and says, yeah, you told us LEED was going to do X, Y, and Z too, and it didn't. So
Can I-
I think it's important to have the case studies.
I ask you something too. You mentioned earlier in Europe, the power of the bankers, developers,
Yep.
insurance companies. Is there a place in the strategy here to reach out to that set of actors? And at least understand the extent to which they can see something this is valuable. But they're the ones that are, I think, in a position to offer some financial incentives that don't necessarily hit the public fisc right away. And they would seem to be really good partners.
Yeah, they would. I mean, this is also, a kind of banking and real estate partnership, if you think about it too, because the United States is not anywhere close to where they've gotten in Europe, but just to maybe nudge open those conversations and say, well, how would you value a building that way? If you're going to sell a building, aren't you going to sell it based on its environmental, the fact that it's going to be one that is going to withstand extreme heat and has been, designed and built for adaptation to climate impacts over the next 35, to 40 years. I mean, there have to be, and I think that it's just all how you sell something and how people value what you're selling.
I wonder if, almost a study or a look or something that really kind of says, here's how real estate and insurance and other companies are responding, and banks are responding to these types of developments.
Well, Joan, they've got this.
It gives that extra push to the developers of, you want to be thinking about these things because, here's the advantages of going in this direction, that it's good for you, not just.
Joan, they've done a number of very fulsome and very compelling studies in Europe.
Yeah.
Because there you have this very rich market, and I think that's helpful. Maybe, maybe certain developers are going to say, yeah, if somebody's going to be on the cutting edge, I'd like our, company to be on the cutting edge.
So the studies are there, it's just publicized and using it as part of the argument. How about, because DC, I think, is requiring full electrification for new buildings, and I think the Montgomery County is moving in that direction, is, to what extent that works to our benefit, because it's basically the same developers. And if they're going to have to do it in DC and Montgomery County, it makes it easier for them to do it here as well.
Joan, at this given point, I don't think we know, certainly. And on the next slide, there's going to be this kind of just rough framework of the outreach. And there's going to be a lot of pre-outreach with developers because I don't know what's in their mind. I don't know whether they'll think, well, I've got to do it there, but if I've got choice, I would choose not to do it. Or maybe they'll say, well, I've got to do it there, so I'm just going to make it part of my business plan. So yeah, you know what I mean? And I think that kind of knowing that tells you whether you make that a baseline requirement, whether it becomes a kicker on an additional requirement. That's a policy question, and I don't make policy. I just give them the information they need to make the decisions. But it has to be a really kind of frank conversation that we have with them. And they have been pretty open with us, to be honest with you.
They seem to be more interested in moving in the direction that we've encouraged them to do, at least from some of the more recent SPRC processes.
Yeah.
They're not quite ready to go that. And also wondering whether, there seems to be two issues. One is Dominion now, seems to be a big issue. And how do we actually think about that or deal with that? And the other issue, I think, is because they don't design these buildings properly, because they're not thinking of this early on, then all of a sudden they've got a space issue because, the space needed for centralized hot water is different than the space needed for gas-powered hot water.
Joan, there are a couple of questions that I'm going to throw out there, and without taking too much time on this, because I know you've got a full agenda tonight. Yeah. There are a couple of questions, and again, I'm just throwing these out there not as an advocate. I just think they're questions we have to address. Electrification, when we're talking about equity, can turn out to be more expensive for low income and in low income, you know, a much higher percentage are renters. So we run into two issues with low income. We run into what Carrie was talking about, the split incentive, where you have to give the owner of the building a special incentive to change the centralized systems. Otherwise, they're like, well, I don't pay the bill, I don't care, you know, so, and then because gas is cheaper. So I'm not saying those are insurmountable things. I'm just saying that they're things that we have to think about and solutions that we have to build.
I mean, we
Can
need
I-
something directly
Yeah, can I ask,
targeted.
gas is cheaper
Initially,
when?
at purchase, but it's,
Gas is
Less
cheaper for the equipment? Or
Yes.
to consume over a long time? Okay.
Yes, it's
So-
cheaper for the equipment and the cost of the energy.
Okay, so it's not, and for the cost of the energy is what you're saying?
Yeah. So, but
That seems like a very broad blanket statement, considering the volatility of the cost of gas.
even with a heat pump.
no, it actually, believe it or not, yeah, it's really just, I mean, that's around the country. This isn't just, you know, in Northern Virginia or just in the Commonwealth. This is the conundrum that when energy and climate implementers are trying to get to that next level with electrification, it's the one thing that we're all looking at is, you know, how are we, is it a subsidy? Do we start out with a subsidy? And we have to start looking at market trends because like you said, at some point, the market is going to level off. So the price point will not be so different after a period of time, but what do we do in the interim? The other thing, and I just don't know whether it's going to be a long-term thing or a really short-term, you know, single governor term thing. And I didn't have enough time to really this weekend summarize everything, but I'll have that by the next Energy Committee meeting. So we'll have a summary that we'll share with C2E2 as well, is the governor's grand energy plan for the Commonwealth and the legislation that he signed in order to affect that. And as some of you probably know, he was, you know, a year and a half ago, he was very, very hot and he was putting secretly a lot of investment into small modular nuclear. And then all of a sudden kind of cost benefit ratios started coming out, and that didn't appear to be a real practical investment because it's so costly and you've got to really super upscale it before it can carry the demand. So now he's really gone full bore on gas. And I have to say, Virginia's a little interesting where you only have single term governors. I think if you don't like the governor's policies, maybe that makes you happy. But it also makes a lot of very, you know, kind of sudden bouncing around as we've seen from, you know, Reggie to where we are today. But I think that they're going to start acting in a way that's going to make gas even more affordable. So we have to prepare for that and have a countermeasure to that. But Joan, I think it's going to be more of an issue probably in lower income housing than it's going to be for brand new high rises or commercial.
Yeah, well, they should be actually more eligible for a lot more in the way of government subsidies and credits, rebates and credits that.
Yes.
So, you know, and again, you know, if you're doing a comprehensive retrofit development that looks at the total cost of ownership, total cost of energy throughout the life cycle, you can get, you know, the savings should be pretty good if you're getting so much more energy efficiency.
And
Can I ask,
sure.
Going back to the question, is that the question of gas being less expensive for heating? I'm assuming you mean for heating, water heating, and cooking, right? Because those are the three primary, right? That was in a study that Arlington commissioned, or is that in Bloomberg, or where did you?
That's pretty well around the country. And just for example, the other thing that you have to take into account is that with the equipment, if you've got huge gas systems, then the power infrastructure that you have for electricity in your building is typically going to have to be upgraded in order to electrify all that gas equipment. So that's also a cost too. You're going
Understood.
to have to change the electric panel and everything else. So it's,
Understood.
yeah. And in fact, it's
You
what
were talking
deters
about
quite,
new buildings. You were talking about new buildings, weren't you?
Yeah. Well, I'm talking about new buildings and existing buildings if you went to convert them.
Okay, but if you're not doing that, if you're just doing, if you're just talking about a new building.
Yeah.
Then you wouldn't be upgrading stuff. And I imagine there are efficiencies of putting in a heat pump for heating and cooling as opposed to putting in a cooling system and a heating system that's gas.
The question 3 to 4 years ago for pure electrification was always when you got into, particularly for these new high rises that were going up in Arlington, and large commercial buildings, is the capacity of the technology at that time, the electrified technology, to be able to handle the entire building. And at that particular time, it was generally very, very reliable for around 10 stories. And after that, there was always the strong possibility of having to have dual systems, having two systems to handle a higher building. So the other, in terms of the context that Joan was talking about, the board was also saying, well, we're looking at what we presume is going to be rapid improvement of the technology.
Right, and so, I mean, my understanding is that's no longer an issue. Didn't we just have someone in here? I forget what they were talking about, but they were specifically saying that that's not an issue because someone was actually talking about they were building a tall building that they no longer, that they did not see that as being an issue. Am I the only one who remembers this? Like which building that it is we're talking about? Where they was it one of the school building? Was it government building? John Bloom had brought it up.
John's online, yeah.
Hey, John.
It might have been one of the last Crystal City project that JVG Smith did.
Yes.
And they were saying that that elevation issue is no longer, at least as they knew it was not an issue. And because I remember John distinctly noting that, well, we've been told in the past that that's an issue, but if you all can do it, why aren't anyone else doing it? And the response was, I don't know, this is what we know this works.
Yeah, except I don't think they ended up going fully electric in that building.
Yeah, they didn't go fully electric in that building.
But they're less resistant now to just say that the technology isn't mature. They're saying, they're coming up with other reasons.
I mean, we're edging closer to that, and I'm not going to pretend that I'm up to date on exactly what, I think we're going to have to look and benchmark the entire region to see what, and hopefully have a couple of buildings that at least have been in operation for a year, ideally. So we have a full year of seasonality. So that way, any kind of, kind of pushback or any kind of counter argument can be, undermined if we do have the data and kind of the breadth or at least some scale of it would be helpful.
Wrap up on the timeline in that.
Yep. So the next slide, Rebecca. So because again, this is a big change, and because we're talking about existing buildings, and because we're talking about this training, module that we think is really, really critical, so that in that early part where we're not in the room, and it's not reasonable to expect that we will be in the room, that there could be voluntary uptake in these design standards. So it could go a little bit longer, or maybe it'll go quickly. So we're looking to engage, interdepartmental staff in a broader way. We've already been talking with CPHD just to give them an early heads up that we're not just going to do the, expected hype of update. We are set tentatively for an early May presentation to Greg Emanuel and Mike Moon. After that, presuming that we don't give them a heart attack, we'll go on to the county manager's office and give them a presentation. And then obviously after that, it's really going to roll out to a lot of key external stakeholders, the commissions and the committees. And we're hoping that we'll get kind of more interest. This has always been a subject that has had very kind of boutique interest in the public and boutique, return on the comments. But we're hoping that this kind of approach, presuming it survives all these other levels in some form or another, is more attractive to the public and returning public comment on it. And the only reason that we're trying for public comment, I have to say, is it goes back to that valuation that you were talking about, is how does your jurisdiction, how does your culture value these buildings?
Now, the timeline is still getting the new policy in place by the end of this year?
Yeah, I'm hoping, Joan. It all depends on kind of like how bogged down everybody gets in the detail, and that could be not a bad thing, but.
And then the kind of pre-launch is you're kind of thinking there's a 6-month period between when the policy's passed and when you're kind of expecting.
Again, that's a proposal that staff is making. It's a policy decision. My personal feeling is that 6 months of really, really aggressive, really dynamic, really compelling, really engaging outreach, particularly to the people who design and build buildings here or buy buildings here, is going to be important, I think.
When were you thinking? Is this before the policy's passed or after?
What, the training?
Yeah, would be afterwards.
I would think that it would be after, don't you think? Because how the board kind of tweaks and makes changes right up until the point where they adopt.
No, I was thinking of that, but it just, kind of, you'll be engaging them a little bit more, kind of trying to encourage them to, keep an open mind and look at what actually happens, rather than really oppose strongly anything that they don't really like.
You're the first group that we've bounced any of this information off of, even as high level as it may be. So we'll keep you apprised. We'll either be successful or we'll suddenly disappear and be shunted off to an undisclosed location someplace.
Yeah. I just had Demetra, hi, it's Eric again. I like the idea of the training and the workshopping up front. I hope that that's successful. I wonder if you and the staff and your team have given any thought to like the marketing and branding of the actual program for the key stakeholders and the developers, so that on the back end, they can wave something around that they think has real value in the marketplace. Have you thought about that?
I would, Eric, I'm glad you raised it, because as much as I have, admired the program, even when I was in California, I admired the program. Green Building Bonus Density Incentive Program is a real mouthful, and it doesn't exactly go tripping off the tongue, does it?
Just a thought.
I agree. Yeah.
Can I have just one last question? I wanted to get a sense, this is Mark. Do you have a sense that somebody could go into this program and do a really cutting edge building on one or two of the major factors we worry about? Is it going to have a minimum set of obligations that everybody has to do? Or is it something where you can push the envelope? And I'm thinking of this in terms of private sector risk. Somebody who's willing to take some bigger risks in one aspect of building a building that proves something that maybe can be shown as a model for others, might be willing to take that risk, but maybe do something more conventional in some other aspects of the building. So is it something that can be case by case in that sense, or is it?
Is that Mark Greenwood?
Yeah.
You know, Mark, we were toying around with the idea of, in order to stimulate maybe kind of early uptake and interest, we were toying around with the idea that when the program went live, again, assuming it goes live on roughly this kind of model, if we would give an extra kicker, maybe say for the next 18 months, we're going to offer an extra bonus density kicker of, X for people who will elect the climate adaptation model, or someone who will do this baseline and these added, additional bundled measures, or something of that nature, just in order to stimulate, because we're also really focused on getting early uptake so we can start as soon as possible measuring and tracking the performance of the building. And the team also met, so because again, it was a pity. It came out of very quickly, it came out of an exercise that Drew Stilton, our greenhouse gas inventory expert, was going to do on the entire program and estimate the greenhouse gas emissions that were avoided by having the program as opposed to business as usual. And because of the lack of consistency and completeness of the tracking of the program, and because it changed so often, it just became like voodoo mathematics. So we also sat down. I had a conflict last week, but the team is really great at this, so they don't need me certainly micromanaging it. But they sat down and they started talking about, okay, as part of this program, what metrics are we going to track? What metrics are important to show value and performance under the program? So that's part of it too. So I like your, the way your mind is thinking, and just to let you know that we were also kind of thinking, well, is there something extra that we can give in like the first 18 to 20 months in order to hyper stimulate uptake in the program?
Okay. I would just offer that when I was at EPA, we did several efforts like that, and we found there's a certain category of companies that will come out and say, if I do this, I'm taking big risks financially. Can I get something special for that? And it was very clear. And we did some things like that.
What things did they want?
I can't talk about the financial incentives that we're thinking of, because it's too early and we haven't socialized that at all.
Oddly enough, it was just recognition.
Oh, really? Interesting.
We had a award program. I was part of the Design for Environment program did at the time. And you got an award. Fairly low cost to get an award.
And that it may have market value, actually.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's just something to think about.
No, this is great. I'm taking notes.
And
as you can see, something like this, we're going to iterate with you and stakeholders extensively on this.
Doug, did you have any questions or comments?
Not at this time, thank you.
Okay, just wanted to check. Demetra, when are you going to have something kind of more concrete that we can kind of get our sense of, will it be before May or after May?
I think it'll be after May, because we'll go to Greg and Mike, and like I said, when they kind of, recover from the shock, we're going to have to go to the county manager, because we're going to need the county manager's early advocacy on this. Hopefully they'll think that it's worth being advocates for the program in order to really do something this bold. You know what I mean?
Great. Forward to keeping track of that for people to know we've actually had it.
I'm thinking, Joan, are you on hiatus just for August or for July and August?
Just for August.
Just for August.
Yeah.
I would hope that we would come back with something in more detail. From the bottom up, we would, be able to give you more information about the training, et cetera, in July.
Yeah, because this sounds trading, that it's all the matter of the details of,
Yeah.
you know, what you're kind of really looking at to get from these developers, in terms of getting the building that we want. So, and then certainly what the incentives would be, and of course, the existing buildings is pretty important because that's the majority of the buildings in the county. And we actually want to keep those buildings and not redevelop them anyway, because there's.
And you know, Joan, it may even call for kind of like a summit or a workshop in advance.
Yeah.
Of, you know, kind of landing on a final or close to final design and really, you know, have input in real time with all the players, you know, at the same table.
Yeah, and just people, we've invited somebody from the New Building Coalition to come next month, so that will give us some ideas of what's going on at the state of the art in terms of really building these carbon neutral buildings, and that would, you know, give us some ideas, and they probably will have ideas in terms of what might incentivize developers.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they look at some of the buildings and some of the jurisdictions that we're already benchmarking.
Mm-hmm. Oh, sure.
Yeah.
So maybe turn to the next one, and you were going to talk a little bit about Accelerate.
Just really quickly, you know, Accelerate, we were looking at using this as a rough, I mean, obviously, as if we use it as the format or the rough format for an annual report, it's going to cover more sectors, so everything is going to be crisper. There's going to be less text on each thing, and there'll be more tables and more graphics used to, you know, illustrate the information. But just to let you know that this was, number one, something that we thought the entire community would be more apt to read rather than look at a PowerPoint or a memo or a table. It has a lot of flexibility to it. And just to know that even though it comes out of air, its intent is to cover the entire county as in all of government. So you saw stormwater here as well as transportation. We're looking at the water pollution treatment plant, Eric Grabowski's team over in solid waste, and other measures to really highlight more. I mean, you know, you don't want to dump everything in one edition, and you want people to come back and be engaged each time they read it and get new information that really touches them and intrigues them. So,
how frequently are you thinking of publishing this?
you know, we initially thought quarterly, but we think that might be too frequent. So we're toying around with 3 times a year, 2 reports, and then an annual, or maybe just a semi-annual, just one report like this, and then an annual where you capture everything for the year. So if you have any thoughts on that, let us know.
Well, it would be good to get some really good statistics, you know, kind of total greenhouse gas emissions and what's being, or how what the trends are on that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and actually then be interesting to move into the scope 3 of, you know, what's our carbon footprint overall and what are we doing.
I think that's probably going to be in the annual report, Joan, just because of the work and the analytics that go behind it. So I anticipate that for the annual report, definitely.
Yeah. Would annual be the end of the calendar year? Or fiscal year?
I think so. Fiscal year always confuses people. And quite frankly, we have a lot of programs that go on calendar year.
Expect probably would take a couple of months to calculate the numbers.
Well, it takes, it takes at least a couple of months to do the analytics and the text. And of course, you want everybody, you know, every single department is entitled to go over and look at their section or to provide us their own text. What we're doing is what we're trying to do is get information so that there's a single writer, so you don't have 18 different tones and voices in the report. But of course, we want people to approve their sections. So yeah, it is. It's an undertaking.
To meet Carrie here, I know I shared a few ideas about how you might get it out to residents, but what would you're thinking about, prior to any of my comments, about how we might get more Arlington residents to actually see and read this?
We were looking at really, obviously using CIFED, the civic associations. We were looking at, and forgive me if I've got it wrong, is it Peachtree or something like that, that goes out to every parent of, yeah.
Peach
that-
Star?
Yeah,
Peach Star goes to all parents for APS.
Oh, okay.
We pay for it. It's $100 to just do one blast.
no.
Not a school parent anymore.
And then we were looking to do little kind of email blasts or social media blasts and things of that nature. I think they're going to sit down, and I'm going to step back and let the outreach experts kind of do their thing. Rebecca is going to be sitting down with DES comps and the county manager's comms team, and really saying, let's get this out so we socialize it, so the community feels like they own it, like it's their report. You know what I mean?
Right. I think a good result would be that it sparks interest and people write to the county to ask more about things. And I'm wondering if you have a plan to correspond with of the public, members of the public who might ask questions or want more.
They're always welcome to email DES Energy at arlington.us.
Maybe they will.
Yeah.
I can see this could be a good vehicle too, to promoting how people themselves take actions
Yes.
in terms
Yes.
of reducing their overall carbon footprint.
And very quickly, before I let you guys go, because I know you've got more on your agenda and we're just about out of time on this, is two things to keep a lookout for. Is that we're probably in April going to be releasing an RFP out of the stormwater program. There's a lot of support and analytics and legal and regulatory, but there's a strategic section, a strategic planning section, that the first two major plans coming out of that, and we're probably, as soon as the contracts are inked, we're going to issue task orders for a flood resilient design and construction standards guidelines manual, as well as not your grandmother's green infrastructure program, which is really going to cross over into biophilia and a couple of other areas, because as I think you've heard me say before, the county only owns 4 to 6% of the developed or the developable land in the county. So if you're really going to reach your goals, your long-term goals, it really takes a concerted, imaginative, inventive approach to engaging and getting the private sector to be your partner. So that is going to be something that we're going to be looking at every single possible innovative green infrastructure in design and public spaces, et cetera, possibility. So there's going to be those two things, and we're getting closer. The NOFAs are starting to roll off the presses slowly on the federal money. So we're going to start targeting probably 4 to 6 main applications. That doesn't mean there's only going to be 4 to 6. Don't forget that we are working collaboratively with the COG and with NVRC. Joan, we're looking at trying to push under, I think, the pollution reduction and the greenhouse gas reduction. We're looking hopefully to get a regional outreach and education module going, that multiple jurisdictions like Fairfax City and Fairfax County are definitely at the table, as well as Prince George's. So we would have a uniform but very powerful curriculum that would be deployed on a regional basis. But more to come on our applications for the federal grants. And John Bloom, did you see I copied you on that update to the EVSE funding? Last time I listened to VDOT.
Yeah, thanks, Demetra. I saw that.
Yeah. So just so you know, we were on a webinar, I think around 2.5 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, where VDOT said that the money coming out of the IRA was for state and federal corridors, and that in their mapping, and they brought up the map. And Bob Lazaro was there, so was Jeff King. We were all kind of really disappointed. And they said, as far as we're concerned, Northern Virginia is built out. So we're like, oh, heck, man, not another, offering that we don't have any eligibility to squeeze in there and take advantage of it. But then Alana, our legislative liaison, emailed today, and there was something about the headline that made you scratch your head. And when you opened it up, there are 2 sectors under that funding, and one of them is for local roads and local EVSE. So we're pushing that with, we're working with 2 consultants on our federal grant application. So we're going to push that up to one of the other consultants to start developing a proposal on that pursuant to what we were talking about. Now, again, it appears as though that isn't on private property, so it's going to be in the public right of way and on public sites, but we've been developing a network of public access, public use sites on county properties for around 4 months now.
Joan, just
Yeah.
one quick comment, stepping back to this Accelerate. Hi, Dimitri, it's Rob Sandola here. I love the publication. I love the use of graphics. If the general audience really is the general public, this may be a bit long for them. I like the idea of doing this annually where you have the full report, but then you might consider like a monthly or quarterly kind of spotlight on just one area and like a 1-page fact sheet that residents can digest, that maybe you can go out to the schools to talk to the kids about, or other ways to get the information out there, including Peach Jar. But you need kind of bite-sized chunks, because if folks aren't in this stuff every day, a report this size is probably not going to be read by the general public. There's a lot of great information there. I like the minimal text and great use of graphics, so it's really well done. Folks like us can geek out on this, but not everyone else will really.
And Rebecca was really ingenious, because we were actually able just to piggyback onto a license that our consultant had for most of the images, so we didn't have to pay for them. So
It's great.
Yeah, it's great. It does look really good, but I think Rob's right about the link.
yep,
That's
like
worth-
little teasers, sound bites.
Yeah, and again, as more information is out there, if it's more how the public information the public can really use.
I personally think that this could literally take over all of the current missing middle dialogue on next door.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Wow, I'll take that as a compliment to the team, because that missing middle got intense there.
We need humor. We need humor.
Yeah.
Thank you, Demetra.
Thank you, Demetra.
Thanks very much.
Okay,
All right.
so
Thanks, everyone.
next item is our budget letter. I hope people had a chance to read it. Do we need this a little larger for people to see? On the back?
That'd be nice.
So much easier to do this type of thing virtually. I think some of this on the programs can tie in nicely to supporting, an aggressive update of the green building incentive policy, as well as the whole Green Homes Choice program.
Did you, Carrie, I know you sent this around. Did you read it from your doctor? I was, but I actually have to give more credit to Joe, who had most of the building blocks in place from other letters and talking points. I think further down, there's one point that I think we do probably need to clarify about where the money's coming from. The 2.6 million. That, I can't recall who had the comment. Maybe it was Rob.
I think-
I think that was me.
It
Yeah,
needs to,
Mark, yeah.
actually, there's a savings, but, is there, it's not exactly existing in the budget, right?
No,
Right.
no,
So
it's
it's a theoretical
money that they don't have to spend,
Correct.
but again, it's like, well,
But
they
Yeah.
would have to spend this, so why not think of, kind of taking some of that savings and spending it,
Right.
investing it more in this type of thing so that they'll actually get more savings in the future.
Maybe it's just a rhetorical point and to get people thinking.
Yeah, I mean, one of the key things is, I very sincerely doubt that the county is going to consider
moving all of that, it might be a
Oh,
good
I agree.
justification. But
That's
what
why
it
I
does
thought you did.
demonstrates pretty strongly that
Give that money to somebody.
when we do these things, it actually works to the financial benefit of the county. Not that it's just the right thing to do, that the county actually is benefiting from it. So finding the funds to invest in these things
And
will pay for themselves.
there's probably no segment of the entire county budget that over, at least over the last 10 years, has produced this kind of savings. And so, I mean, even not just saying 2.6 million, but investing in energy efficiency and clean energy can, has provided greater savings to the county budget than any other segment of the budget in the last 10 years.
On what basis? Is it an annual basis? Is it over 10 years? Is it over?
I think
what
it
is
will
the
vary
figure?
every year. It depends on what, the rate they would be paying if they didn't, because they're locked in at a particular
Could we say an
rate.
estimated
That's last
26
year's.
annual savings? Because that is more impactful to
That's
say.
just last year, right?
Yeah, this is, or just for this year. No, because it just went in this year. So over the course of the year, that's what they're gonna, So probably a little bit estimated, but, and it probably will fluctuate every year.
Should we add one more sentence that says this shows the kind of impact energy efficiency investments can have? Something like that. Or renewable energy investments can have.
Well, and can we say 2.6 million?
Annually.
Just
Last year?
right, because we're not talking about over
Just
10
this
years, we're
Just this
talking
year.
about,
During the year.
Yeah.
Well, no, actually, this is FY '24. That seems to be what they're applying it to. So I don't know whether,
What is the introduction of these bullet points? What's the sentence that's?
This is everything that actually doesn't have to do with the proposed 24 budget itself.
Yeah.
These are other ways to make an impact.
what kind of
I
structure
just
did?
wondered if the word investing is what was, I think I was tripping over that because it was.
It's not real money. It's not money in the budget.
Right.
It's money saved to the county.
Well, that's maybe continue or extend the savings of 2.6 million
build on.
associated with something like that. That investing seemed to beg the question, investing in what?
Yeah.
Maybe maybe it's just a different.
Investing more in this sector
Well,
can increase the savings that already is bringing $2.6 million savings.
Or maybe this actually has to move up to the previous paragraph, as a point that investing in this sector
Yeah.
brings about other savings to our budget.
Yeah.
some of the thinking of the first two is the two previous paragraphs. First is, we need these kind of one-stop shop programs to get out to the private sector, which after all is 96% of our carbon emissions. And then the county needs to lead by example, which means, every opportunity they have, they replace gas with electricity, they replace and that includes the bus systems, so that, so those are kind of outlining, these are the investment, or these are the spending that should be in the budget. And then saying, but, because they're going to come as, well, this is all really expensive. So coming back and saying, number one, you're getting money back from it. So first of all, there was the 1 million last year that, they're now spreading out over 2 years. So it wasn't as appealing, attractive as impactful as what it might have been. But then, it's like, well, we've got you're getting over $2 million. That should be beside that. And then, it's like, and then there's all this other money that's out there. There's other investments like green banks and CCAs, again, that all bring money too, but the county has to be kind of thinking and investing in it. And that, collectively, that's where all the money is going to come from if the county's committing to doing these things.
I think it's an important point that the achievement of 100% renewable power procurement 2 years ahead of the goal is really nice. But the savings are dramatic, and that's not part of the tagline. And I
Well,
guess
you know, we
now
can
that I look at
actually-
this,
yeah, we can
I'm
actually
stunned that
move
it's
that.
not.
Yeah.
Well, we can move that up a little bit
It
ahead
should be
too.
like probably the line, second line up front. Like this is
Yeah, why-
saving millions of dollars for the
Yeah,
county.
let's go, we've got that paragraph, because we had that one paragraph that says, well, yeah, okay, we appreciate
Yeah.
some
That
of
you're
the things the
doing
county,
things.
you're doing some
Yeah.
things that they just aren't. But we could,
Your
I think we
term
have the
let's save
Maplewood, the
county
next
More than
paragraph there.
$2.6 million.
So,
Make a bolded statement.
No one
there.
has said that anywhere.
yeah, why don't we
And
take that first bullet, or second
It's almost
bullet,
like,
make
hey,
it the
this is a nice
first
to
one,
have.
and we can add in, and
Here's the
saving the
C-
county
You're the
$2.6
CFO, you're the
million
county manager.
dollars.
That's
That
That's
would,
it, that's more powerful.
That's all you need to know.
This is
Yeah.
screwed up.
And,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, but the other point is, okay, we're saving it, let's go ahead and spend it back where it can.
Yeah, I wasn't sure.
So should we add that, elevate that point to the second bullet?
Yes.
The maple
I
wood?
And you could make it
so.
again later too, as noted.
Just repeat it.
Oh, no, don't cut that.
Yeah, I don't, you know,
That's
I'll
all.
leave that there,
We've
just
saved
saving the
$2.6
county
million
$2.6
this year.
million.
Give us the money
Rebecca, go
All right.
to
ahead.
save
Copy that second
$2.6
bullet.
million more.
Oh,
I move it up.
No,
No?
we've got it up there.
They're literally
I don't see that.
hundreds of
Go back
billions
up.
of dollars.
I mean, you just mentioned
available.
Maplewood, but you.
No, but I was
Or-
gonna say is we just put in saving the county $2.6 million. Save the county $2.6 million.
That's right.
Okay,
During
I
the
see,
year.
okay,
Yeah.
just add the text.
That's
Yeah,
right.
but you know, at least for me, I think it's worth making the point of, you know, money
Thank you,
savings.
Rebecca.
Let's spend it where,
Generate.
Will save or has saved?
Maybe I didn't look at the budget closely. Is this presented as in the budget as a
it's
minus
not,
2.6?
it's actually not, it doesn't show up anywhere in the
Maybe
budget
we
where
want to
it
make that
shows up.
request.
Where
That they
it
do
shows
show
up
it.
is when the county manager did the presentation to the county board, they mentioned this. So you actually won't find it in the budget because savings don't tend to show up in the budget.
Well, saying, should we highlight it? Should we request earmarking the money that we save for
Right,
the other
yeah.
projects, right? And actually show it as a line item.
Yeah.
Budget.
All this needs to be deleted, right?
No, I think we need to say just in FY '24 to show that this isn't just $2.6 million over the next 10 years. This is next year alone will be 2.6.
Next year alone.
Or-
Or you can just say FY '24 alone.
And the savings are actually from reduced electricity costs due to the virtual power purchase agreement. Linking the savings to that action.
Which is what precedes it too.
Already perceived, it's.
We've already said it.
Yeah, for sure, remove it. Yeah, I think just will generate $2.6 million in savings in the coming fiscal year. I think that should. Well, it's just went into effect this year. They haven't even got the full year. This was all just copied.
Yep. It's hard to edit, isn't it?
I know.
Yeah.
That's okay.
This is why, I mean, this is why signing
Doug, you had something?
because they're blocking.
Yeah, I wanted to, this letter relies very, very heavily on bullet points. And it's, I mean, more than half the letter is bullet points. Okay. If you're going to use bullet points, I really think you got to set them off with a blank line in between each bullet point and between the lead-in text and the bullet point, you need to have a blank line. Otherwise, it all gets jammed in together. And it's just from readability point of view, it's a really struggle for the reader to parse through the denseness with the bullet points. I think you set them off with the blank line, yeah.
Doug, it's funny,
And then they stand out.
It's funny, I modeled this on our budget letter from last year, and we had a lot more text, and then we decided to put them in bullets to make it a little bit shorter.
You have to remember, I worked for the government and we use bullet points all the
Oh,
time.
yeah.
That was the readability. It's like,
Me too.
you know, main point, bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, you know. It's like,
Because it'll make it a little bit longer. Anyway, we
I
have a
did.
number of sets of bullets, so we may have to do it across the board there.
Right.
Yeah, but we can format that later, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a formatting issue, we'll take care of that.
Okay, were there other, I mean, there's a few comments along the side, I'm not sure if we're reading it as we go.
Those are.
Yeah,
those
that's
are-
true. Oh, okay, those are the new ones. I thought that was the only real substantive.
Carrie?
Yes.
Would this be a place to bring up the stormwater wise program or?
You mean the lack of
Yes,
funding?
lack thereof.
Yeah, don't we have something on stormwater in here?
I don't think we do on this one, do we? Unless it gets a brief mention. Yeah.
We certainly could. In the past, some of the stormwater funding has come from state grant programs.
Yeah, I know we did include in our stormwater utility letter that there should be.
Right.
Reinstate a program similar to the stormwater wise as part of that.
So what
program?
shall we add it?
Yeah, we could do that.
Our letter is heavily focused on climate.
Well, maybe that third bullet on the first paragraph, because it kind of fits into helping, it would be kind of more the climate mitigation. No, the next paragraph, after the offer programs.
So add a third bullet, you mean?
Mhm.
Yeah. Stormwater.
Yeah, kind of.
Reinstate stormwater.
Or similar programs to help mitigate problems with flooding. As, you know, as part of, as the county moves forward with the stormwater utility. And that kind of picks up on our point that we made in the other letter. Do something as the county moves forward with the stormwater utility.
Is it one word, stormwater wise?
Yeah, I think so.
One word? I
It's
think
one
they-
word, but I think capital W too.
Okay.
Carrie?
I just add
Just a
something.
quick question. Right up front, you say that the budget for air, the proposed budget is being cut by 8%, and a position is being eliminated,
Yes.
which is bad news. Do we have any comparable information about budgets for similar air agencies? Say, I don't know, from Fairfax to Montgomery to Alexandria to, we know?
I've looked at some of those programs. I think in general, they're spending more for, again, you know, most of like Fairfax County and DC. DC spends a lot, so I think if you put it as a proportion
I
of
think
their
they're all
total budget, it
larger.
would be much higher.
We have our
Um,
dashboard that somewhere.
Yeah,
I'm just
but
curious
I
if
didn't
we
look
could-
at this year's, at any comparable budgets for
Okay.
other, but I have looked at several others, and if you kind of do the, I mean, if you do the percentage of the total budget, it does, you know, we're not spending nearly as much.
Okay.
Of course, you know, sometimes it's hard to drag out what actual expenditures are when they're cut across different agencies, but.
What's
Yeah.
awkward about that 8% reduction, that's for the air budget,
Yeah.
but from what budget does the position that got eliminated
That's
come
from
from?
the county manager's budget.
So it's from the
that's
county
separate,
manager's
yeah.
office, okay. So that's in addition to the 8%, but it's harder to know what
Yeah,
overall.
and of course, they actually never filled that position, so.
You don't know what.
So they hired a county climate officer with whatever the title.
No, yeah, they hired, yeah, but there were supposed to be two positions in that new office.
A junior
they
one.
didn't have
decided
In
to
addition to in addition to the senior position, there's supposed to be a junior position, to like to support that senior role. And they eliminated the junior.
Why did they do that?
Because
Brandon, don't know.
we don't have.
They never
We don't
explained
know.
it. They never
Yeah.
explained it. They just never hired.
Again, the optics on all this doesn't
Can we
look
ask
very
the
good.
county manager?
We can, but we've never actually
Yeah.
received.
Feel
an
free.
answer.
We have an
Fair
explanation.
enough. Okay, I withdraw.
Yeah, I mean, it made sense not to fill it until they filled the senior position, but, you know, the optics are not good.
You know,
And it probably doesn't make sense to fill it until Bill's got at least a couple of months in the job to know what he wants.
That's probably their thinking, if I you know, let's see how it goes
Okay.
and let him get his feet on the ground and then
Yeah.
we'll see what we really need, what
Okay.
he needs.
But, you
Got
know,
But it's not a good signal.
but they should say, we definitely know he's gonna need some help. So, you know, we'll wait.
The other thing that happens, and I learned about this today, is the stormwater program, as an example, has employees that are in the stormwater program at DES, and it has individuals who are part of the stormwater program who sit in another part of a different department of transportation. And so when you start trying to match these things up, you find that there may be somebody else out there that's in the program that's actually not sitting in the place where you'd think they'd be sitting. Apparently that is I understand that's a common thing that's happening in Arlington County. Somebody in the Department of Parks is part of the stormwater program because they're in our. Okay.
So,
So
You can get lost in
although this one seems rather compact. But
maybe they picked up somebody somewhere else.
No, they didn't.
Well-
I mean, that's
well,
the
they
thing.
did put one position last year in with transportation to handle the EV charging and that infrastructure, but still the air program is the major implementer of most of the major climate programs, so.
And that senior role was explicitly designed to have.
That one, yes.
Right, like to have far-reaching scope over the entirety of government functions for the kind of same purpose that you were talking about, that the stormwater office, you know, has people here and there. At the high level, they find you would have that ability from bird's eye view to engage with, and they were budgeted to have a senior and a junior person, and my understanding is not only did they not hire that junior person, they eliminated the funding for that position for the upcoming year's budget. So it's not just, oh, they haven't hired them yet. It's
We don't intend to hire them.
we don't intend ever to hire them.
I think that's better reflects, yeah.
Okay, so.
Yeah.
Anything else?
If there was anything else you guys as authors wanted, that you were raising, that you were worried about, or.
Emotion?
To accept
Yeah,
the letter.
motion to approve, yeah.
I move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And
Any
thank you for
opposed?
your diligence.
Right, there's a lot of information.
I will be talking at the county board meeting tomorrow based on letter.
Okay.
Okay, so then we have the Americana letter, and Cindy, that was your project?
Right, so the Americana is that hotel on Crystal City, Route 1. Going to be a 19-story residential tower. We had a chance to look at the letter. The interesting thing about the Americana, I think, is that, you know, they're not making it at all. They're working hard. It's JBG Smith. They're doing a lot. But, you know, we talked to them about all electric, you know, during the conversation we had before. They said it's not technologically feasible. They brought in all these experts to talk to the SPRC. I, meanwhile, had made a connection with a building decarbonization coalition, which is a California-based group. And so after they explained that, I asked the question at the SPRC, and they explained all the reasons why, and then I said, well, I talked to this other expert, and he says you can do it, it would save you all this money, and, you know, given the HVAC system you've already chosen, you could do all electric hot water, and there'd be a lot of synergies between them. So they did, I put them on the spot, and they agreed to meet with them, and they have been meeting with them. And supposedly they've had good meetings, but they're not ready to commit. And meanwhile, the Building Decarbonization Coalition, as Joan said, I get them up to speak next month, and I hope they'll be able to do that. They've agreed to. You know, they're saying they're in California. You know, they keep saying they have to find us the Ted Tiffany's the expert we've known remind us the TED of Virginia, is they can't keep giving us all this free stuff unless we come up with some funding, which I don't think we can. But it has been, both TED says they've had great conversations, and I've talked to the architect and the JBG's people, they say they're having great conversations. Nothing has come of it so far. But when we do, I don't know, I see we have SPRC on the agenda for the next topic. When we go to the SPRC meetings, we're sort of, when they say it can't be done, it's hard for us to say it can be, I don't know about you, I just don't have that expertise at that structural systems level. So it has made it good to bring the conversations a little bit further, but we'll see if that happens.
It seems like that's something that should be established once and for all. Is it possible or is it not?
Yeah, but even the JBG people kept saying the technology has changed. This is the hot issue throughout, the construction industry as it should be, and that the technology is changing weekly, they say.
But once we've established it's possible, even if technology will get better, it won't get worse.
Right, exactly. Well, they don't.
So then they no longer have that excuse.
Well, they don't agree that it's possible. I pointed out, I found online an all-electric building in Silver Spring that's 12 stories. They were interested in that, but anyway, as we have these discussions. So anyway, in the first paragraph, I kissed up to them, thanking them for doing that, which I do think was helpful. And I appreciated their openness. And I think it would save them money. They'd be very happy to do it. I scored it at 64. I think we can talk about as we go. There is a certain amount of subjectivity in our standards. Of course, our standards aren't the same as the GBI program, which, as much you saw Katie Crystal was talking about. So that was the next question. The third paragraph, I wanted to call out that, we say, this is sort of our standard language in practical terms. That means 4 things for every new and renovated building: make it highly efficient, make it electricity renewable, and minimize its total carbon footprint. The great John Bloom, who I think is on the phone, suggested adding to that standard paragraph, what do we mean by minimize its total carbon footprint, other than the things we said in the previous 3 items? Through selection of low carbon materials and advanced management of construction debris, similar words to that. So that is a change from what we said before. I want to point that out and see if anybody had comments about that.
Can you point me to exactly where we're?
Can you highlight the Rebecca through selection
The
of
new building.
the fourth, yeah.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
Through selection of low carbon materials and advanced management. Yep, it's the 4th line down, midway through the sentence. Through selection. That's it. Through selection. You're there, Rebecca, just above that.
So when you
Selection
calculate
of low carbon
energy
materials and
system.
advanced management. There, so that's the language we've added.
You say advanced management of energy systems and construction debris?
Well, I think you
mean digital?
Yeah, I mean.
Well, it's basically
But
recycling
that's,
it rather than taking it to.
No, I know.
That's the highly efficient part, though.
Right, I think
that's
we
the
covered
first
some
item.
of it in highly efficient.
What is advanced management of construction debris mean? Don, if you're there. It sounds like advanced recycling.
And
or
I think,
something.
John, you said advanced management of construction and demolition debris.
Advanced. How about
Just say responsible management.
I like responsible there.
Well, I think it's mostly diversion of.
Forward planning.
Responsible is fine.
Advanced sounds like something
Yeah.
super technological, but I just.
Yeah,
Waste minimization.
yeah. I mean, I think mostly the
I
idea
think
is
that's
to
good.
actually recycle as much of
Yeah,
the materials rather than taking it to a landfill.
Right.
I think that's
So,
good.
in the
Responsible
next,
management and recycling, advanced
Doug has it.
reuse.
Yes.
Yeah, so just the last 2 sentences of that paragraph seem a little disconnected. So we say JB Smith's application falls short, period. And then there's an abstraction about hypothetical new buildings that lock in use of fossil fuels for decades. Is it accurate to say that JB Smith's application would lock in use of fossil fuels for decades?
Yes, because they're proposing fossil fuel powered systems.
Well, then I would say JB Smith's application falls short in meeting these criteria because it locks in use of fossil fuels for decades.
That's only one, that's a major element, but it doesn't cover the
Yeah,
construction
I would
debris.
say, and, fall short of meeting this criteria and locks in. Or, I don't know that we want to mess too much with our standard letter, but we have been saying,
Buildings like this one?
build new buildings such as this, lock in use of fossil fuels, that lock in. Yeah.
Thank you. That's much more specific and ties that last hypothetical sentence into the reality of this particular building. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Doug. So in the next paragraph, a question has been raised that maybe we'll talk about in that SPRC discussion, which is we ask for everybody to go for LEED Platinum. In our standards, we would like everybody to do LEED Platinum. That is not part of the GBI program right now. And I don't know if the question's been raised whether we should be more broad about that. Is LEED Platinum really what we want the focus of our ask, our big ask to be? Maybe we should park that.
Yeah,
That
well,
is our
I
standard
think some of the
language,
higher tiers go up to platinum,
Yeah.
but the problem
Right.
with LEED is it's not terribly useful because you can get high LEED standards and still have fossil systems.
I think we eliminated
Energy's
the
a
reference to
small
LEED.
portion, yeah.
And our real ask is that they do a zero carbon assessment and actually implement as many of the recommendations as possible. So-
Why don't we, I feel like we're Americana, just because I'm raising these issues, but I don't know if we want to talk about that separately. I'm going to keep going and let's highlight that and
We
come
just
back
say
to it.
recommends developers
I feel
explore
Options
options
to achieve zero carbon
to just drop
certification.
the LEED.
That is what we want.
Yeah, I just, it's already there though.
Yeah.
Just delete all the LEED,
the
strike
LEED
each,
platinum
LEED
stuff.
platinum, LEED platinum.
John Bloom.
Wait, so
Options to explore options.
Explorer,
It's
it's already there, get rid of them, more importantly.
got it.
Okay, well, that was easy.
There you go. Yeah,
That'd be a long
Okay, drop the options too.
Right.
Recommends developers explore options.
So in the next,
Explore
So
options
you
also.
you just take out the two. Developers to explore
Get rid of the two.
Recommends
That
developers.
that
developers.
developers
That
explore,
developers.
recommends that developers explore options. I think that could be good. The energy efficiency, they do have good numbers there. We tie back into the zero carbon feasibility, that's again pretty standard. Going to the electrification of systems.
Do we want to say something more just,
Or
which is
nicer.
which is, higher than what most projects we've seen have achieved?
I'm happy to say that. I think they have
I
worked really
think we
hard.
should, let's give
Be
them,
positive.
so
Especially in
after
light
the
of what Mark was
85,
saying about
put,
awards and recognition. We might as well.
which is higher than
That is
most
what
projects we've
the first
reviewed
paragraph
have
that you
achieved.
might actually read. Yeah, which is higher than most similar projects. I worry because it knows that they're really going to achieve it. That's what they're planning.
Well, that's what they committed to though.
Or
So-
then maybe
It's a
propose,
start.
Which is why they
propose to
always.
achieve.
No, I think it's, I
Have
think they
achieved.
lock in, they have to get the 85.
Yeah, they have to.
I think they have to
Prove it.
demonstrate, I don't know.
You're right.
Okay.
We never get that
Yeah.
information.
No.
So-
But they put money down
Yeah, that's
that
true.
they don't get
wanna
back
have-
if they don't reach the goals.
So back to to electrification of systems, this explains, this is their big weakness, that they're locking in, use of fossil fuels. I would love to, so suppose that they actually have a fantastic conversation, the building decarb people have sent them, specs on different systems they can explore. Suppose that they call back before the planning commission meeting on April 10th or the county board meeting. I guess when it comes time to make a motion to approve this letter, I'd like to make it subject to approval, subject to any changes by, say, Joan and
I think
me,
so, yeah.
so that we can update it, because I know that if you watch that Monty clip, which was amazing, and he did an amazing job, but the developer kept saying, oh, but we changed that.
I don't think they necessarily did.
Well,
But
that's,
again, it was not in any of the data that they had submitted to the
that's a
public that
different
we
question,
do,
but if
so.
they do change it, I wanna make sure we keep our
Yeah.
letter as up, and even if we
Yeah,
change it
no, I
between
mean,
the
if we
planning
can get
commission
something,
and
yeah.
whatever. So that was my
And
only
even,
comment
we can go even
there.
as far as even after we submit the letter, when we go to speak in front of the planning commission or the county board.
Right.
We can acknowledge
So-
any changes.
This needs to be our new template letter, because we.
Can I ask a question? How are we going to know if there's?
I keep emailing them, so, but there, you're right, that's another key
Yeah.
point
We
about
don't
the
often
SPRC,
know,
after
yeah.
the SPRC2 meeting, we're out of the loop. We don't know anything unless we keep asking. I keep asking.
They have decreased incentive at that point to respond, because it's moving on to planning
Right,
Yeah.
committee.
but, yeah, so it is about relationships, and that's, we're sort of somewhat adversarial, and yet we need to have that, we're all in this together, so keep me posted thing. At some point, they're not gonna keep telling me, no, we still haven't made any changes. Yeah, we're still talking to your people, but we haven't made any changes. But anyway,
Cindy, a lot of credit this is one of the kind of the earlier times we've actually gotten some of these projects to step forward and engage with us.
Yeah, great job. Cindy.
So,
well, thank you, but.
Just quick
Dog
question, Cindy, you said primarily electric HVAC systems, so I'm assuming they're using heat pumps with fossil gas backup?
They're using fossil gas backup, but they said that they're using, I asked that question at the SPRC2, and they said, I said, is HVAC all electric? Besides the backup generator, they said, well, what? And they said about 4% gas, 96% electric. And I don't know what that means.
but 4% gas, is it even worth having it?
That's a lot of infrastructure for 4%.
Yeah.
So,
The reason that they do that, I believe, is there's a couple days a year that maybe it's 10 degrees or 5 degrees, and they kick that system in. If you don't have that, and people are a little colder than they otherwise might be, they're gonna be very, very upset.
well, that's where things are, and that's why I put that in.
Well, sometimes the DOS systems, some of these things use gas.
So that's actually good news. What frustrates me is that it's fossil gas for water heating.
Well, right, that's the
Yeah.
big issue here, and that's
Uh,
what the building decarb coalition people say
Unnecessary.
is not
It's not.
necessary. And you see buildings in
Not the residential
California,
or the commercial.
I mean, the technology that has to flow from California across the country. But, and they say they've worked with the same engineering firm that is doing the Americana in California. So,
How many
anyway,
stories is this building?
19. And it does get harder, I understand, over 12, but it's still possible. Anyway, so there's that paragraph. The electric vehicle charging, I don't know if 50% is high. I mean, people, again, you get the Dominion capacity issue, and people roll their eyes at 50% because not all cars are being charged at all times in the garage. But anyway, they're doing 15 they need, so for this project, we don't have to talk about whether it should be. I threw in the IPCC, just like Carrie did in the budget letter. I changed that paragraph a little bit. And those, I really want to talk through the chart, but those were the questions, those were my main comments in the letter. So did other people have other comments?
The only thing I would commend you on bringing in the Building Decarbonization Coalition. It's funny because I just sent their website to Joan in the context of the earlier conversation. BDC, I know them, Rewiring, I know them really well. They are, they want to support this, okay? So I know they're a nonprofit. I also know that they're very well resourced. I think that we should be trying to leverage them in whatever capacity we can to push back against this, oh, it can't be done, the technology's not mature, blah, 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 blah. And we're sitting there saying, well, we're C2E2 and maybe I'm not an expert in this thing. There are plenty of experts out there. They have them. We can call on
They
them.
referred me to some too, but those experts, they referred to me, don't work for the nonprofit. They're start.
Right, yeah.
And that's, but anyway, and yeah, I
Okay.
sent Joan
But
everywhere.
good for you.
Well, and that's
Good for
why,
you.
something at the county level that they can put a little bit of money to send these experts out for a one-time consultation.
It's not that expensive,
You know.
and I think if we could get a little money.
Maybe add it to the budget letter.
Yeah, well,
Well, there's $1 million, maybe,
Yeah.
I was part of a program once, and there was a function called Ask an Expert. Meant that anybody in the world could contact you and ask an expert. And it actually works sometimes. You could answer an inquiry with like an hour of your time and, provide value.
So, the county, is Demetra still on?
Yes. Still on.
I don't know if this falls under the NREL what do you call it, C2C?
Can we pull in NREL?
Well, I mean, frankly, I emailed a colleague while we were having this discussion, asking about it, and he said that he was going to get back to us. But I don't, he's not. He knows people who might have the answer, but it would just be like if he's got the time, as opposed to a program that Arlington County has received X number, I don't know, it's like 30, 40 hours of free consultation from NREL, primarily focused on support to low-income housing in South Arlington. And I don't know if this would, fit into that or not, or if it's something that they could, I don't know. It's just something that there are people, I'm sure, at NREL who know the answer to this. I don't know who they are. And maybe going through that program that Arlington has funding for, get the answer.
Yeah, I think we kind of.
John, I'm sorry, what specifically is the question that you're asking? Would it fit into that program?
Could the commission, through the county, reach out to NREL through its program to get answers from experts? Is that the question?
Well, not just answers from experts in general, but a select number of a select set of questions about the viability and cost of electrification for
Right.
heating, water heating and space heating here in Arlington.
right, and I think that would be great, and if we can get some money for experts from any source, private or public. I think, and maybe that AIR has got some of that. But another way to go was raised is if some of these systems do cost more to put in, initially, we were talking before about how gas is cheap to put in, and then over time it gets more expensive.
That's the whole life cycle.
Let people put that extra cost in as a public benefit and get density for it. I mean, they're not getting density with the GBI program. So there are ways to help them with that. So there's a lot of play. There's so much building here. I don't know if the Amazon pause is going to change the amount of building and the amount of money. But right now,
Doesn't seem that way with the site plan
it
process.
sure doesn't. We're overwhelmed with that.
Yeah.
And I know that we're going to run out of time, but can we scroll down to the chart before we get to the letter? So, because I think it's hard, we're all filling out these SPRC charts and there's some subjectivity and, if we're going to say 64 is one of the higher things we've given, I want to make sure that so one question I have is the zero carbon in the second, where there's the red in the second box, they've said that they will do the zero carbon certification study. They've said it, they put it on their website, they've said it from the beginning, they actually have checked it off that they have, that it's a done deal. They haven't actually finished it. So do we have to rate them as, can we say needs? It starts to make a difference in the scores.
I would say needs.
Be amazing,
Yeah.
because I think
feel
they
like
will
needs
fall
is good.
through, they did do it for the,
I'm sure they'll do it.
Yeah.
It's been on there, so.
we can't change it here, we'll have to change it there, so we'll adjust
Okay.
the numbers.
Okay, so we can change it there. Then going down, I hope you'll all agree with me on the Air GBI, the bottom of this Air GBI required narrative. That, the county planning staff sent me the narrative that has been provided. It's been provided to the county hasn't posted it, but the county plans to post it. I gave them pay exceeds, as if it's not, they gave it to the county for posting. I don't want to ding them because the county hasn't had a chance to post
Yeah,
it.
that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think exceeds is right.
That's fine.
So going down to battery energy storage, which is pretty far down, battery energy storage. So I left this one blank, which makes a difference in the score if you don't say fall short, because they're not generating they're not generating electricity. Now, you could argue that having battery energy storage would be helpful for the future, for future conversions, et cetera. But, that's pretty far advanced. That's not where people are now. So I'm.
We have
Almost nobody's doing it.
Well, I mean, we
Nobody's
can't
doing
get them to put electric, hot water, and HVAC systems. So
So this
this is further along, so it's.
right.
Should we even have it on our checklist
Well,
currently?
but
Might
I
ask.
mean, that's kind of the whole thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, wasn't, when we designed this, what is meets expectation and what's the penalty for not meeting expectation?
And what is not applicable?
Did we have a non-applicable?
No, we don't. That's why, but if you leave it blank, it doesn't count in the score, so it's at the end of it. But I know we have left it blank at least once before,
Well,
but.
But if it's 100, the thing is that in order to get 100%, they would need to have that filled in, right?
But yes, nobody's getting anywhere.
But if they get meets, they're not,
It has to be exceed on everything.
They have to get exceed on everything. If they
Right.
meet everything, it's about 66%, I think.
If we gave
Right.
them meets, they would actually get some points here.
But my point being that they would need to, my point being that when we design the scoring of the system, if they got everything else exceeds, but they didn't have battery storage,
They would get it.
they would if we didn't answer it.
Because it's not part of the
It's not counted.
Right, so the point is that, like, I mean, part of the whole system is to get 100%, you need to exceed everything, and if you're not,
Would you put meets here? Or
no, because they're not meeting the expectation.
They're not meeting.
No.
But their argument is it's not relevant because they're not generating electricity.
You don't have to generate electricity, you can pull electricity from the grid as a resilience issue, you can pull when it's cheap and hold
The
it.
asterisk. But I will say, going back to the idea that when we do these, we either have consistency, we have left this blank.
Those are our own questions.
We shouldn't, because it's for backup, because if they don't do that, they need to have a diesel generator for backup.
Can I ask a dumb question?
That's kind of the
since
whole
I'm
point.
Still relatively new. Is there a criteria like that tells you how to
No,
if then
I keep
statement?
calling Joan. Poor Joan.
Oh, poor
And
Joan.
John.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
Like-
it's a good because it kind of highlights. And of course, we're going to change the GBI, so how much do we want
Right.
to?
Right, and it may be that the new GBI, when it's ready, which won't be for a while, maybe we'll have to see if there are still areas where we want people to go beyond that. But biophilia is another one. I mean, if you've been to Crystal City lately, it's not like there was biophilic before. So,
Once upon a
but
time,
is
it
it 18.8% tree canopy? There's like a 2% tree canopy there now, but I'm not giving them, I'm just giving them needs because it would take a complete transformation of Crystal City to get an exceeds over there. But again, that's just sort of a gut feel of, does it look, is there a lot of native plantings? Is there, it's just,
I think to your point, there is a fair amount of subjectivity in some of these.
Right,
You just
and
take a call,
right. Well,
but a
that's
little guidance might help.
super actually for them, but it's a matter of time.
I mean, we are the ones who built this,
Right.
right? I mean, it was
A lot of us,
primarily.
there are at least one of us who weren't here.
Right, I understand,
Yeah.
but what I'm saying is that that this isn't someone imposing this on the outside, so we can talk about it, and if we feel like there's a need to change this.
This gets into our next conversation about the SPRC.
Why don't we go ahead,
Yeah.
if people have
Yeah.
any other changes, then we can go ahead and approve the letter.
So should she leave it blank? You should probably say do not meet.
We said we aren't.
And that even lowers the score, right?
That will lower the score.
Except that we
Yeah.
changed something else where I think it increases.
Yes.
the score,
Yeah,
didn't it?
it's
So it might be
still
a
a wash.
wash out.
I think it'll end up a little bit lower, but still pretty good shores. Stormwater, again, something I don't know much about. Do they they have a partial green roof? Is it enough of a green roof to give them more
Yeah, on the
credits?
stormwater, I
say no.
usually just say it meets because most of that's required by, because the meets is whatever the state or the county requires for stormwater.
But we say that if you have a green roof, that can exceed, but I don't know how much of a green roof you have to have. Anyway, and then this dark sky certification, they arguably, they need it, it's arguable. Okay, so I guess we need a motion for this letter as amended.
I move to approve the letter as amended.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Good job, Cindy.
Yeah.
Yes. And I do think hers should be the new standard letter template because we've modified some of the language, standard language.
Yeah, and as people do these things, feel free to kind of raise questions and debate because, this is something of a moving target. And again, some of these things.
An evolving art.
Yeah, and the other thing was on the energy efficiency is the meets it's at 75, but then we said exceeds got vague because it got tied to the different tiers of the GDI, which nobody lives up to. But in this particular case, they're actually exceeding and getting to the 85 under Energy Stars. So.
And it goes to Demetra's point that they only wanted the 0.25 of bonus density, even though they're getting 8.3.
Well, the problem is
they're getting 8.3 bar and only which is over the 3.5 requirements. They're getting like 5.0 and bonus density program is providing 0.25 of that 5.0, which is why Demetra's saying they don't have enough leverage.
It is actually the only community benefit that has any numerical relationship to increased density. So, I think it's just, and we've got one project that's on there that's not even going for, actually, they're not even trying to achieve silver, the sunrise in South Arlington.
Wow.
So, who wants to take that one? We need a volunteer.
I get a very low score. Yeah. Shall we move to the SPRC discussion?
Yeah,
just because we've like
kind of hit on
a lot of the topics.
Right, yeah.
Right. I asked for this to be on the agenda because I, like many of us, I'm sure, have felt frustrated and feel frustrated with the SPRC process because the current approach is really never to provide an opportunity to discuss the building systems. It seems as though it was not set up. It is much more heavily focused to what the immediate community thinks about the looks and the transportation, traffic issues, pedestrian safety, plus architectural interest. Plus, there's always folks commenting, which is good because it's on our checklist and we care about native plantings or not, that kind of thing. But there never seems to be an appropriate moment early enough to raise what kind of systems are we using? Does this building add to or subtract from our ability to achieve our 2050 community goals to be a carbon neutral community, according to our community energy plan and hopefully someday a climate action plan. So we all spend a lot of time on this, and I feel like, isn't there a way that we as a commission can be more efficient at insisting at an earlier entry point for discussion of the building systems in the process such that we're not sitting at long meetings when there's no chance to really say anything and nobody's listening when we have 30 seconds to say something about why we continue to have fossil fuel systems, power systems. And we talked earlier with a previous chair of the Planning Commission about reaching out to the chair of every SPRC from day one and insisting that building systems, energy systems be an agenda item early. But I don't know why we can't somehow request that it be standardized. And I'm interested in other thoughts and feedback.
So Carrie, one thought that I have on this is instead of injecting more commission sort of comment at an earlier point, why don't we make a programmatic recommendation to county staff about collect this information up front at the start of the program with an understanding of at the end of the program when the commenting comes out, it's going to get all sorts of bad ratings.
Yes.
Because they're making bad choices at the start. So that input would be something that staff would be providing at the very beginning of county review of the projects, and make a very firm recommendation from this commission to staff to use this checklist to inform every project applicant that this is what's coming down the pipe.
They're going to get pushback on that particular thing because they're going to say that that is not the county's policy because they cannot require buildings, private buildings to build.
They can't require it, but they know in the comment process, this is how it's going to come out from that comment. So we're giving you this heads up
Yep.
to the extent there's any leverage out of what
Well,
we're doing.
this is what I did with the current SPRC that I'm associated with, the Verizon Wells Fargo. I sent the blank checklist before any of it started to the SPRC chair and the planning committee staff representative and said, would you please share with the applicant? Because these are the kinds of topics that we will be asking questions on and we will score. And I got no response to the email about whether they shared it or didn't. And so I do think that we should request that applicants be informed from day one about the kind of questions this commission is going to care about. They're not going to say that they're county requirements. But the commission is part of the SPRC review.
And most of these requirements are built into the higher tiered SPR or higher tiered GBI. So, I mean, certainly the staff should be engaging these developers up front is, how do you think you can achieve the zero carbon certification at this tier level?
Well, so, I mean, yeah, I mean, we did do this, Kevin. I mean, specifically when we produced that first checklist, like a year and a half ago, we specifically asked, just like Harry said, the staff pushed back, said that's not their role. And we did ask, was her name Elizabeth? Liz? What was the name of the previous?
Joan?
Jessica?
Jessica?
No. No, the previous chair of the review committee, of the planning committee.
Is it Elizabeth Guerin?
Sorry, Elizabeth?
Elizabeth Guerin.
I think so.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And what she had said when we spoke with her, this goes back like 2-3 years, she had said, oh, we have something like that in the third structure.
Too late.
Right,
Yeah.
and I mean, I would say we should, is there a new, I don't know.
Yeah.
There's,
Well, Tim,
I would say we should write a formal
Yeah.
letter.
Well, that is my point. I mean,
Yeah.
right now, we shouldn't accept staff says we're not doing it that way.
Yeah.
We should be making recommendations in order
But
to
it's not the
achieve the
staff
county's
decision.
goal.
It's the commission, it's the planning commission, it's a parallel equal commission that decides their agenda. And I think we really should.
So we should have a
Yeah,
commission
and
conversation,
have-
which we did before. Joan and I did with Jim Lanthelm, the previous chair of the planning commission.
How did it go?
And he just made that suggestion that every time there's an SPRC, reach out to that chair and say, I'd like energy, other systems to be on the agenda. But it requires every one of us, every new SPRC, and
Right.
there's many of
Yeah,
them.
I
do
mean,
that.
when we're doing this and we're sharing the checklist and we're trying to engage from the beginning and we often just don't get response. And frankly, I've sat through 2 of the second SPRCs where they put, they have, look and feel of the building and the site flow as your first one, and then everything else is piled up into the others. So at 9 o'clock, they were getting around to sustainability, and it's like, okay, we're out of time. So, we did around the table comments, and I, kind of went off on, we're not happy with this project on sustainability because of X, Y, and Z.
And nobody wants to hear it by that time.
Yeah, and although Jim Lynn me, he talked after me, and he says those are the kinds of questions we're going to want to ask you at the planning commission. So I would say is having watched this over a couple of years, at least we're getting some engagement and some acknowledgement of what we're doing. And, the county board actually even had a discussion on it. In some cases, it was Katie kind of confused as to why we were doing this separate from the GBI, but that's okay. That is, they're talking about it, which is actually, I mean, when I first started doing this, it was usually like,
well, we don't even think about those things. We're not going to know what the energy efficiency of this building is until we get beyond the design stage that we're at.
And I've had other commission, because we have one chair at the table in these SPRCs, and all the other commissions have their seats. And every time I've sat on one, and I admit I haven't sat on many since like a year and a half.
Oh, we have got opportunities.
No, there's a reason I haven't. But
hey, your kid's over a year old.
Sure. Every time I have, like half the other commissioners who have nothing to do with this in their actual formal scope are like, yeah, what about, there is a lot of support for what we say in these commission meetings. But it's because it's not a formal part of it, it becomes haphazard. And so I think if there is a way to bring it up, maybe not in an SPRC, but actually at a planning commission hearing, like so that, I don't know how the planning commission runs their own.
We can meet with the chair of, the chair
ask
of
them
the
to
planning
join
commission.
us.
But is it the planning division of the county that we should talk to?
It's
I'm not
the
sure which
planning
it is.
commission, because it's the planning commission that chooses what they want.
Well, one thing I've raised, and actually, that maybe we'll work it out, I don't know whether it will happen, is I think it would be great to have a joint meeting between planning, transportation, and our commission to talk about these issues, because, and maybe we can kind of, because I think there's a little tension with transportation, because they want to improve the transit side, but they don't want to electrify. But I think, if we can kind of talk about the big development issues that come up, and maybe we actually can come up with ways of how we kind of make sure that some of our issues get reflected much more broadly.
Well, maybe we could ask if we could appear, maybe 3 of us or so, go to the next planning commission meeting, the regular meeting, and ask if we could be an agenda item, SPRC reviews, and talk about it at their meeting, because I think they're going to be less motivated to come to have an extra meeting.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to say that one thing that we did, because everybody's right, the information just isn't there early in the process. So when the first step in the process is to open it, they post their stuff and they open it for online engagement. At that point in the Americana, we felt like the online engagement was useless. We wrote them a letter, which county staff forwarded to the developer, JBG Smith. They sent us a lot of detailed information, and that is what we go. So SPRC is such a public process, but we were going back and forth on all the stuff they were sending us, and we were writing back. And then we did the same thing on Crystal Towers 3, Joan and I did. We sent them a long letter, and it fell through the cracks. It did not get forwarded by county staff. I followed up, and they forwarded it today, and the developer leaped on it and said, well, how are the answers in 3 days? So what I don't love about that is then we end up with non-public information, but it is incredibly helpful. And then at the second SPRC meeting, what I did was make all that information public. So it gets there, but it does get us the information early in the process, which is exactly what Gary's saying, but it's not built in part of it. I think it should become our process. We
Just
look at what they
keep trying
post,
to be
and then
consistent.
we ask for what they don't post, which is 90% of it.
But so there's no systematic solution that we can achieve, do you think?
I'm saying, in the meantime, while you convince the planning commission to change it, this is what I think.
And we can go forward and maybe say, we'd actually like to discuss sustainability at the first SPRC. Because I've been to a couple of the first SPRCs, and we're out in an hour and a half. And then the next one, you're out. It depends, the project, if there's something controversial that the community doesn't like, but I've been to 2 and we were out in an hour and a half. Whereas these other ones where it's 2 hours, and, the last one, they actually put sustainability up front, so we actually got to talk about it. But, it doesn't, again, they're trying to put in an awful lot in the second session.
And then they keep scheduling these SPRC meetings on Monday night, and the last month,
Right.
yeah, because
They're trying to
avoid
Steve
us
may
appearing.
actually be at an SPRC instead of here.
Maybe the planning commission, instead of having a total, maybe it's too hard for them, but instead of they're having a totally standard here, the 5 issues we do at the first SPRC, 5 issues we do at the second. Maybe they should look at the project.
Yeah.
And see where the
Well,
pain points are,
technically,
so that
they've
you're
got
not
that
at an hour and a half
yeah.
there and then 3 hours. on the
Technically, they've got that flexibility, and theoretically, the online comments should help direct that, but it's still pretty much standardized in terms of what they're looking at. And again, you know, even on the online comments, and anybody of you can go in and make comments. Whoever's got the lead can go as C2E2, but, you know, the more people saying, yeah, we care about this, at least it will, you know, kind of get a bit more attention.
And every once in a while, media attends the SPRC
Yes.
process,
There was-
and they'll write about it, but they're not, if, like.
Or they write about it, they never write about our issues.
So, well, it was so funny, I had no idea of that. I was Googling, trying to find out the name of the JVG Smith contact person. I Googled him. Up pops an article from Arlington Now about our SPRC meeting, and I am quoted at length about the building decarbonization.
No kidding.
Coalition.
Oh, really?
I had no idea, but I did get the last name of the guy, so I could email him and bug him, which is what I needed. But I, you know, they say who all's on the phone. I had no idea there was media on there.
We could bug the media to, I mean, the Arlington Now to like.
They're out in force.
Yeah, but you know,
right now.
yeah, I mean, even where they have discussions in depth on these issues, sometimes it doesn't show up.
Well, but I'm saying we can engage directly
Right.
with Arlington Now to talk with them about projects. And we can say, look, this is our assessment of this project, and it's embarrassing. I mean, we did that for the whole Amazon thing. There was a guy from Arlington Now that was following John Bloom around as we were doing the site review for the first Amazon building. I forget what that one was called.
Can I ask you a question about our checklist and percentages?
Yeah.
Do you think that's helping us?
I think it's making us look like hard asses.
Yeah.
Sorry, excuse me.
It feels a little arbitrary.
Well, the scoring system, you know, anybody who was ever a good student is not going to want to see the kind of scores we give the building, right? It is a bad PR for ourselves in a way, right?
But yeah,
Maybe we need a little
that's
grade inflation.
that's part of the point of saying, and I tend to say as well, you know, those that are doing the GBI are meeting the minimal sustainability requirements. But again, you know, we're trying to hammer home is we've got to stop burning fossil fuels. If we're going to deal with the climate crisis, and this is burning fossil fuels.
But you
So-
lose your audience if they think you're unreasonable. And
That's true too. But did you hear what Christian Dorsey was saying at that? He said,
remind me what
he said, oh, you know, we shouldn't be, you know, this is aspirational. We shouldn't feel bad about approving projects that have a 59% score because 59 is better than it could have been.
Oh, he did say that.
Yeah, but I don't know if I couldn't
Okay.
decide if that was good or bad because 59 is a terrible score. And the fact that we're all excited that the Americana might break 60 is not, you know, it does. I mean, I think these are great questions. I know we're out of time, but I would love to see us talk. And I also think that talking about the change, I mean, both Katie Crystal and Christian Dorsey, who have talked a lot about this commission at that hearing, they're both not running for re-election. They're going to get new people. And I don't know what we can do about that. I don't know how to. There's a way
If
to
you run into the
plan for
candidates,
people.
talk to them.
Right.
Educate them.
That.
That's,
Yeah.
you know.
So I mean, just got a good point here about time.
Yes.
So
Yes, we are. 10, 11 minutes.
Yes.
this whole discussion about the SPRC and how to get, you know, how to get our issues maybe a little front-loaded in the process. Isn't this something that presumably like Bill, the, you know, climate lead could and should as the point of
Very
being
good point.
the county of looking across the board? Isn't this exactly what this person was hired to do?
He's coming to our next meeting.
I would disagree because,
Yeah.
again, because just as we are independent of the county government. We do not take direction from the county manager's office or any of that institution. The planning commission is just like us, an independent body that chooses what they want to hear from the developers in order to decide whether they are going to give a thumbs up or thumbs down to a project. And then the county board doesn't have to go by what they decide. And I'm not saying that it wouldn't maybe influence their decision, but the county government does not have, as I understand
Well,
it.
I mean, I think Bill can help, with the education, and he's supposed to bring about that all of government approach, so at least everybody has a better understanding. And hopefully with the GBI update and, some of the things that Demetra talks about, if they're fleshed out, that more align with the kind of criteria that we're setting, that would, kind of ease our burden a little bit in terms of, we just focus on, are you doing the climate pathway? So that's going to change how we do that. But again, and hopefully that might get a stronger message coming from the county staff as they work with developers as they're submitting these projects.
I think we'll have to look at the agendas. I know, Rebecca, we do this to you every time. So,
Yeah.
but if the head of the new county climate officer is preparing, maybe we shouldn't also have the coalition.
Well, I think we can, unless something major else comes up that probably would work. We do have 3 projects that need somebody to lead, so.
I have 4 now.
Oh, you got 4 weeks before.
Maybe
Okay.
something's been filled.
I don't know. Yeah.
I have Shirlington, Sunrise, Red Lion, and Roswell.
I haven't been focusing on Shirlington. I can't quite figure out what that one's about.
It's a little weird. I can't figure
Yeah.
it out.
It's not a building.
It's called Shirlington Public Improvements.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are public improvements to make it true.
Is it, it's not the art?
Yeah, it doesn't sound to me like it's something that we need to worry about. So if they ever
That's fine.
publish more information, we can decide whether we want to engage. So there's the Sunrise.
I will follow up.
Okay. All right. So 3 more. Okay. So if we can get, and anybody who, can work, Carrie and I and maybe Jonathan can work with people that will just partner up and make it easier for folks. Anybody got any major things pressing?
No, I'm happy to team with someone to support
Okay.
one of these first time through.
Okay, great. So we'll live that, because I think I have to get names in by the end of the month. Otherwise, they put my name down.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
And thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Right.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rebecca.